With Norman Powell officially in the mix for the Chicago Bulls, the Bulls now have their projected starting five of Josh Giddey, Norman Powell, Buzelis, Caleb Wilson, and Nick Claxton. On today's episode, we're going to talk about why, for the first time in a while, the Chicago Bulls have an identity potentially with their starting lineup and the balances that's going to bring. You have size, you have length, you have transition pressure, you also have rim protection, as well as a veteran scorer. The Chicago Bulls have one of the most well-rounded starting fives that they've had in quite a while. So the question that we're going to answer today is, what is going to limit that starting five potentially, and what is going to be the strengths of that starting five, as well as a play style that Tiago Splitter could employ for this starting five. We're going to talk about all that plus more right after this. What's going on, basketball fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host there, Haize, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that said, let's go ahead and get into this. Before we get into the content, make sure you guys hit that subscribe button. We got a goal of getting to 50,000 subscribers by the start of the 2026-27 season, which is a lofty goal, but we set the goals high here. Make sure you guys hit that subscribe button. In exchange for that, I'll be giving you guys the best daily Chicago Bulls content you're going to find anywhere around. With that said, let's go ahead and get into it. So the Chicago Bulls, in adding Norman Powell, a scorer, a shooter, somebody who can go out and get you a bucket, something that the Bulls did not have, before signing Norman Powell, and still have a lack of shooting overall on the roster. But today we're going to focus on the starting five. Tomorrow we may dive into the bench rotation and stuff like that. But I want to focus on the starting five today because I think that it just provides some structure that the Bulls have been lacking for so long now with the starting five. Again, the projected lineup: Josh Giddey, Norman Powell, Buzelis, Caleb Wilson, Nick Claxton. That is a really good balance. We're talking about what each one of those guys get and can bring together, but it has the things that you want from the team. It has a little bit of everything. And I think also we have more defense in our starting lineup than what we've had. You got Caleb Wilson, who, projects to be a really good multi-level scoring, multi-positional defender. Can probably guard 1 through 4 right away in the NBA, maybe even some small ball fives, towards his career. You got Nick Claxton that provides weak side defense, rim protection, also can switch a little bit himself. Buzelis, Tiago Splitter's already talked about wanting to develop him as a two-way player. Then you got Norman Powell, who's a perfectly fine defender, not a lockdown defender by any stretch, but within a team concept of defense, he can do really good in. Having those switchable guys with Caleb, and Nick Claxton all being switchable, that's going to really provide what Norman Powell does really well. And Josh Giddey's not a defender by any stretch. Even though he's made steps as far as being an on-ball defender, he still gets blown up in pick and rolls. But that's why having, the balance that the Bulls are going to have with the switchable defenders, that could help that a lot, right? So it's going to have organization, skill, athleticism, scoring, rim protection. It's going to have those type of things that you need. And there's just a much more clear role defined for each one of these guys when you look at it. So I want to look at when you look at this lineup, the thing that this lineup is going to be able to do really good is they're going to be able to play fast and make quick reads, right? That is a big part of what Tiago Splitter's offense is built around, is making those quick reads. Again, structured freedom, but you want to be quick in what you do. Now we are going to push the pace a lot as well. Like, we're still going to be a team that pushes the pace, especially in transition, but we have more functionality in the half court. There are also some limitations in the half court as well, but there are some strengths in there for real, right? And so the Bulls now have more size up and down this roster as well. That's something that we have not had. We've had small guards or something all over the place. But when you look at the Bulls' identity, I think the Bulls are going to still play best when they play fast. Now, you want to get away from the unstructured quick play under Billy Donovan. When you looked at how we played under Billy Donovan, yes, we did play fast, but it almost, we didn't attack the rim. We played fast. We got it in transition. We stopped for a three. We're not going to do those things. So now with that, we're going to run actual actions, right? So when you think of it this way, especially in playing a more up-tempo offense, you got Josh Giddey, who's going to be able to rebound and push the pace. You got Norman Powell, who understands how to fill lanes and operates in space to the wing. He's going to be able to draw defenders out to the wing with his shooting, but he can also attack the rim. You got a modest Buzelis who can attack closeouts, right? You got Caleb Wilson who's going to run, cut, crash the boards, those type of things. And then you got Nick Claxton who's going to set those hard screens. He's going to roll, and his passes out the short roll are going to be really important. One thing about Nick Claxton that has gone understated a little bit in talking about him since he got acquired by the Bulls is his passing. Now, he's not a Joakim Noah level passer as a big, right? But he is a guy that, when you look at it, 3.7 assists last year for that Brooklyn Nets team. And you look at over the course of his career, he's 2.1, but there's more passing there. And Nick Claxton's ability to pass out the short roll to cutters. And that's why Modest and Caleb Wilson, being the cutters that they can, how they play, not just in transition, but even when you get into a half-court set, them cutting and moving to the basket, moving without the ball, Nick Claxton's going to be able to catch those guys on that. So, that's how Nick Claxton's going to be able to be used outside of the way you typically think about him being used. And that's the thing that really stands out. The passing number is going to matter because he's more than just a lob threat. And in Tiago Splitter's offense, he's going to find a way to utilize that pretty heavily, right? But a lot of the Bulls' actions on the offensive side of the ball are going to come down to Josh Giddey and Nick Claxton pick and rolls. What that's going to do, if you put Josh Giddey and Nick Claxton in the pick and roll, of course you're looking at the traditional lob threat over the top that Nick Claxton can be. But outside of that, you have Norman Powell, who's going to be able to come off pin downs and dribble handoffs. You got Modest, who's going to be able to attack the weak side. And you got Caleb Wilson, who's going to cut from the dunker spot and on that short roll on the corner as well. That is going to be a really good version of the offense. That is more functionality that we have. And so when you look at the projected strengths of the Chicago Bulls with the starting lineup, the size and length all over the place. Josh Giddey's a big guard. Norman Powell has really good size at the 2. Caleb Wilson and Modest Buzelis and Nick Claxton give you a really huge front court that can all cover things, right, in regards to it. And they're all lob threats as well. And then, of course, Modest Buzelis, his three-point shooting isn't going to need to be used as much. We'll get more into that in a second. But he can also leak out for a three-pointer, right? So when you talk about Bryson Graham and his preferred direction for the roster, we're talking about slap. We're talking about being bigger, being longer, being more athletic, right? And that is going to be there. But the scoring punch that Norman Powell brings to this lineup is really going to stand out. He changes so much about this starting group because he can score without needing to be the centerpiece of the offense. There's a stat that went out that Norman Powell is actually a guy that he scores the most points off touches in the NBA, which is really good because, again, this is a guy that only needed 15 shots to score 20 points. He's only averaged 10 shots per game for his career. People have this idea that Nick Claxton's like this heavy on-ball scorer like a Kobe White or was, and or Zach LaVine. No, he's not that. He actually fits better within the flow of the offense because he doesn't need the ball as much. He can shoot off the catch, right? That's a really good thing. He can attack closeout. He can operate the ball a little bit on that secondary pick and roll action, which is really going to be good there. And this matters a lot for a player like Josh Giddey as well, who's more of an organizer himself than a pure scorer. And so, that's going to be really good while Modest and Caleb Wilson are still developing in those areas as well. But then let's talk about the defensive versatility, right? I know I touched on that a little bit, but the front court of Modest, Caleb, and Nick Claxton, they're going to be able to cover so much ground defensively. You have Caleb Wilson, who was drafted, because not just because of his defense, but like his defense is the thing that really stands out, his defensive activity and how he gets out in transition. That's going to be so important. At North Carolina, he led the team in both blocks and steals, so that stocks are going to be there for Caleb Wilson. And then overall, we're going to go from being a weak rim protection team to a very strong rim protection team. You look at Jalen Smith. We talked about last season. Jalen Smith and Modest Buzelis on the court together were already, in just their minutes, not overall, but in their minutes, they had one of the best block rates of any 3-4 combo in the NBA. You now bring Caleb Wilson, who's going to be able to bring the stocks there. Nick Claxton's a solid rim protector as well, and Modest Buzelis. I would not be surprised if again, the Bulls are going to get beat sometimes on pick and rolls, but they're going to be able to recover because of those block shot abilities, which I think really stands out as well. Claxton is also going to let Caleb Wilson play more naturally and flow around more defensively because you're going to have his length and Modest Buzelis' length, and I really like that. The way that we're going to be able to play in transition is going to be really good as well. The way that Josh Giddey sees the floor in transition, the way that Norman Powell can run to the three-point line, you got Modest Buzelis and Caleb Wilson who both understand how to fill those lanes in transition. And then Nick Claxton, he is a rim runner. Say what you will, but he is a real runner. This offense, or this and defense is really how defense is going to turn into offense for this team, is going to be huge. You have players that can get in the passing lanes. You have players with length. You got players that can run and get out in transition. And then even if you collapse the defense in transition, you got Norman Powell can be there and leak out for the three. So this is going to be really good. It's just better role clarity overall for this team with this starting lineup, right? I think when you look at it, Josh Giddey's the organizer. Norman Powell is the scorer. Miles Buzelis is the two-way forward, and he's still developing himself. And then you got Caleb Wilson with the athletic monster that he is and his ability to just make life terrible for teams, especially in the mid-range. And that Nick Claxton defensive anchor is really going to stand out. There's just a much cleaner structure overall to this Chicago Bulls lineup. And then I'll say this. We still have to look at the weaknesses with this team as well. The shooting is still very fragile, right? Norman Powell is going to help a lot with the shooting. Josh Giddey's improvement from three-point last year, being a 37.8% three-point shooter, that's going to be really important because there's still, with the way that we're going to collapse defenses and stuff, Josh Giddey's still going to have to be able to keep defensive honest hitting the open three. If he does that, and they're going to test him early on that, it's going to be solid, right? Not great, but solid. And I do think like Caleb Wilson as well, as he's learning to space the floor a little bit more. But I've talked about with Caleb Wilson too, is that him being a player that, you know, you have to still guard at the three-point line because of his quick first step, his hops, and his length. Even if he's not a great three-point shooter, you can't sag off of him completely because of that quick first step and his ability to get to the rim and get to the free throw line as well. So Norman Powell's going to help with the shooting, but they're going to need other players to step up. Modest is going to have to be a solid three-point shooter, which is, I think it's going to be good for Modest because now he's not going to be forced to take as many threes as he did last year because a lot of those threes are going to go to Norman Powell, right? But he can be more selective with his threes. Half-court offense and creation is still going to be a bit of a problem for the Bulls, especially with teams that have more physical 4-5 lineups, right? The power forward, center physical, because Nick Claxton has the size, he has the length, but he's not really the strongest center, right? Caleb Wilson is strong as a motherfucker, but at the same time, those physical front courts that put you in half-court offense is going to be a little bit more for the Bulls. Yes, Powell can score in the half court, which is good there, but he's still not the kind of that table-setting lead guard. That's going to be Josh Giddey's role there and to put pressure downhill, but we know that Josh Giddey's shot still can be a little bit shaky as well. Once defenses get a chance to set in, that's where I can see the Bulls having the most difficulty at, and that's up for Tiago Splitter to kind of figure out how to get out of that, right? And then I think also the defensive matchup against elite guards. Josh Giddey's not a great defender. We all know that. I've said Norman Powell can be a really solid team defender as well. He's going to compete, right? But he's not that lockdown stopper either. So against those high-powered backcourts, we have two backcourt members that can both go off, put pressure, shoot, score. It's going to be a little bit of trouble for the defense. But other than that, I think this helps a lot. Like I said, it helps. This lineup is going to help Miles Buzelis because he doesn't have to be the answer on offense, but still he's going to have ways to thrive offensively. I think that he's going to be able to settle into that cleaner role, attack closeouts, defend wings and forwards, run in transition, shoot and make your open threes, and grow as a secondary creator as well. If you can get Modest to grow as that point forward that we talked about before, it's going to help that half-court offense a lot as well. And for Caleb Wilson, the Powell, having Nick Claxton and Norman Powell here for Caleb Wilson is going to be huge, right? Because now Caleb Wilson is going to be able to play that roaming 4 forward, right? Instead of being thrown into like having to do a lot of low post things, you're not going to have to do that. Even though I want to see him do that a little bit so he grows his game, but you're not going to have to do that a lot as well. Caleb Wilson's now rookie role becomes even more defined. He's going to run, he's going to cut, he's going to rebound, he's going to defend and finish. Other than that, make quick passes when you don't have the shot, and it gets good in there. And then when you look at the play style for the Bulls overall, right, I think that this is the way that the Bulls are going to play. Billy Donovan's offense is the best way that I can. It's not run and gun. It was run and hope. Run and hope that you were going to make your three-point shot because you didn't do anything else. You didn't attack the mid-range, and you didn't attack the rim as much as you needed to as well. This is going to be a team that wants to put pressure on the paint first, 3-second, and mid-range selectively, right? I don't think we're going to be a heavy mid-range shooting team, but I think we're going to take a lot more mid-range shots than what we did under Billy Donovan. And we'll talk about the percentage breakdown of that here in a second, but I think that that's what you're looking at overall is that you're just going to have a lot more balance to your offense. Last year, the Chicago Bulls shot 4% of their total shots, came at 4.5%, basically came from the mid-range. That's dead last in the NBA. They were dead last in the NBA in shooting in the mid-range. I think now the Bulls shot diet is going to be this. This is just an estimation. When you look at the rim and attacking the paint, is going to be about 35 to 45%, looking at what Tiago Splitter likes to do and how he coaches. Three-pointers are going to be another 35 to 40%, right? So when you look at the rim and paint attacks, that's Giddey, Wilson, Modest, Claxton, they're all going to create pressure at the rim. When you look at three-pointers, the 35 to 40%, you got Powell, you got Modest, you got Josh Giddey. Those three are going to have to make enough volume from three to keep defenses honest. And then mid-range, about 10% to about 15%, I think, is where your mid-range shots are going to be. That's going to be mostly Powell. It's going to be Josh Giddey. And Modest also needs to get back to taking more mid-range shots. I like that balance. The one downside to the Bulls offense is that we don't have true post-up moves, right? Caleb Wilson is going to try to develop that. Nick Claxton is not the true back-to-the-basket post-up center, so a lot of rim pressure there with lobs and things like that, but it's not going to be really a lot of that back-to-the-basket moves. We just don't have that type of center, not in this starting lineup, right? And so because of that, the rim and three, that's kind of the way that you want to talk about this offense for the Bulls. Rim and three, but not a reckless three-point shooting team like we were under Billy Donovan. Still going to be a big part of our identity, but we're not going to be reckless as we were with it back then, right? And I do think overall you're looking at this. Run, especially naturally when you get the rebound, you get in the passing lanes, you create turnovers, you're going to run. We're going to attack the paint after that. Then we're going to spray out for threes after that, and then use the mid-range only as the ability to read the defense and to create more pressure. That's what you're going to try to do. And that means that you're not going to be walking the ball up slow, right? You're not going to be doing that. You're not going to have a lot of slowing down type of isolations. The ball is going to move a lot more freely under Tiago Splitter, especially with this lineup. The goal on a lot of it is going to be drive, collapse, kick, cut, repeat. That's what you're going to do a lot. And I think when you look at how this team is going to attack the paint, it's going to be because of Josh Giddey's ability to be the organizer. Norman Powell's ability to create and leak out and keep the defenses honest, and then Modest and Caleb Wilson living and thriving off closeouts, attacking closeouts, cuts, and those type of things. I think that's what you're looking at. But the three-point shot diet, right? I want to talk about the balance there and how we can keep it honest. Norman Powell's going to have to take about eight three-pointers per game. Last year he took 7.8. He's going to take about 8 three-pointers per game. We needed him to hit that at a 38 or 39% clip. Buzelis is going to have about 4 to 6 three-pointers per game. We're going to need him to be somewhere between 34 and 36, 7-ish% ideally. And then Josh Giddey is going to take about 3 to 5 three-pointers per game. And he's going to have to hit that at the same 37% clip as well. Nick Claxton, no threes. And Caleb Wilson, I don't expect him to take a lot of threes as a rookie. If he can take even 2 threes per game, between 1.5 and 2, I think that's really good. That puts the Bulls starters between like 14 and 22 three-pointers per game, depending on minutes and the matchup that you're going to be playing with. That still doesn't put you towards the top of the league in starting fives, but I think that's really good volume that's going to keep everything else honest for the Chicago Bulls. And then the mid-range balance. This is not going to be an anti-mid-range team like we were under Billy Donovan. This is going to be a team that doesn't build the offense around it either, and it's going to live like Norman Powell late in the shot clock, mid-range. Josh Giddey on those floaters and post mismatches, that's going to be the mid-range. Buzelis attacking those closeout, going into pull-ups in the mid-range. And then Caleb Wilson, when he faces up, his face-up game in the mid-range is really good. That's where he's going to be able to go. And so I think that's where the mid-range shots are coming from with this team. So I think overall, like, the balance of this offense is there. The bones of it's really there. I love what we have. The one thing that this team should definitely avoid, though, well, in the starting five is do not have shooters standing still. Nick Claxton and Caleb Wilson are going to have to each occupy that dunker spot. So you're going to have to figure that out. And then you're going to have to avoid wanting Josh Giddey to just pound out the clock late in the shot clock. You actually have to avoid that. If you do that, the balance of this team is real. The balance of this team is real. You're not going to be a pure three-point shooting team. You're not going to be a run and hope team. You're going to create actual pressure through actions, and it's going to be clean. Fast break when available. In the half court, you got to rely on the Josh Giddey, Nick Claxton pick and roll to kind of set up everything else and what your team does off of that. Norman Powell, Modest Buzelis to space and punish, helping weak defenders. And then you got Caleb Wilson as the athletic cutter and the finisher overall. I think there's going to be really solid balance with this offense overall. We just got to see how it's going to work out. But the last topic of the day before we get out of here, I want to talk about what the Bulls do with that final roster spot, right? The final roster spot, I want to make this clear. It's very possible that the final roster spot is going to be left open. And maybe Bryson Graham wants to leave it open for a midseason move so he can take back more players that he sends out. and have some flexibility. Bryson Graham has preached a lot of flexibility. I think his actions have shown that as well, right? But I do think that you can also use that last and final roster spot to add more shooting or more depth to this team in one way or another. So I want to talk about the players that are out there that I think still make a lot of sense for the Bulls. These aren't guys that are going to necessarily come in and start. But one, Anthony Simons. Like, a lot of people brought up Anthony Simons potentially being a player that the Bulls still bring back, right? And I'm going to say this. I don't think that they bring him back. I think if anything, Anthony Simons is going to be used as a sign and trade piece to send out to a team that doesn't have cap space but needs shooting. But then again, if you find a way to bring Anthony Simons back, that's great. He has shown, he came off the bench primarily for Boston. He was a starter here. If he's willing to come back as a scorer off the bench, then there's definitely going to be a fit there, and we can use even more shooting than what we just have with Norman Powell. I do think overall, though, that Anthony Simons is probably going to be somebody that's signed and traded more than coming back to this roster. Next up, Bruce Brown. Bruce Brown is a guy that played all 82 games for Denver last year, right? And he did a little bit of everything. And I think at this point, even at being 29, not super old, I think this is a guy that's still a versatile player that can play multiple positions. And that veteran voice, that former champion being on your bench that can play multiple positions, kind of fill in where you need him to, I think could be very valuable for where this team is now, especially with how many young players we're expected to play. They have a stabilizer there, and he could be a trade chip as well at the trade deadline for teams that are looking for some veteran help, maybe around the trade deadline. Next up, Gary Trent Jr. I think that this will be a nice pickup. This is a guy that shoots 38.7% from behind the arc over his career. He's capable of catching fire. We've seen him do in the games how he's did it against us sometimes. And I think overall, I'm not saying that he has a whole lot else that he offers to a team, but he does offer some legitimate shooting and scoring for a team that can use some, again, as the back end of the bench guy. Think about how Javon Carter was in that role, where it's times we'd have to bring Javon Carter in and he'd go off sometimes. And other times we get pissed off at him and call him the ball-headed O. But I think that when you look at these three players, I think that these are really the ones. And Anthony Simons, like I said, that's a long shot. If you can bring Bruce Brown or Gary Trent to this team to be that last roster spot, a veteran on that last roster spot, I think it adds enough depth and versatility that you really need on those positions and to see what they can bring. And that's really what it is at this point. You're not bringing in somebody who's competing for a starting spot. You're not bringing in somebody who's necessarily going to be one of your first 3 or 4 players off the bench. You're looking for quality depth and veteran leadership that can help this team as we're trying to develop and help free up some things that could go left for this team. At least that's how I view it. I would love to hear you guys, who's some players that you would love to see the Bulls bring in for that last and final roster spot. But that's going to do it for today's episode, man. I want to thank you guys for tuning in, man. Let me know your thoughts down below. And what do you think of the starting five? We're not getting into win-loss projections yet. We'll wait till we get closer to the season starting, get through training camp before I really do that. But I'll just say this. I'm excited about what this team could be in reality, right? I'm not saying anything crazy. I think that we're going to have a fun team to watch play basketball, and we'll just get to see what happens after that. But with that said, make sure you guys like the video, subscribe to the channel as well, hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode or an upload. You can follow us at Bull Central Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, bullcentralpod@gmail.com. And lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We're the #1 spot for everything Chicago Bulls related, but that is thanks to you, lovely and beautiful people. And like I like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See you right if you can, y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation of Breaks Media.